There's just something so wholesome about this sequence of events, and the reason for that is because this is a happy couple. A couple truly finding happiness within each other, and honestly, it's beautiful because it's clear that they did the deed. They tied the knot, so to speak, and this episode is all about their wedding ceremony. Sylphy and Rudy basically doing their vows, saying they're going to be together until death do them part. And it's just so beautiful because it's so rare to see these type of themes, these elements within a story, and the author not trying to skirt around it. Like, obviously, characters that get married, they're going to tie the knot and do the deed. We know this. And it's nice to see the series, and even the animators don't try to skirt around it. They basically say, yeah, Rudy is having quite the active lifestyle. And I think this shows maturity, but also realism to the story. I know people might write it off as something that just could be like comedy, etc. And yeah, in some degree, it definitely is hilarious. But it does show, once again, the growth, the progression that Rudy has had since the very beginning to where he's at now, and how Sylphy has found a partner and so has Rudy, and they can truly have a happy life together. It's such a beautiful episode of Mushoku Tensei, and it really embodies everything that the series has kind of set up since the very beginning, and that is a second chance at life and trying to be a better person and trying to find happiness in those around you. Because if we think about the origin point of Rudy's life, he was someone that was isolated. He had no one. He lived in four walls and never left his room whatsoever. In a lot of ways, the way you see his lifestyle, you could kind of see a similarity to Nanahoshi, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But the point of the matter is that he was someone very isolated, and upon his death of being reincarnated, and thanks to Roxy's actions and others around him, he has become quite a better person. And thanks to just the overall interactions they've had since their childhood, Sylphy and Rudy coming together is just such a moment that I think anyone, even if you're a fan of, let's say, Eris, or you're a fan of Roxy, I think any true reader or watcher of Mushoku Tensei will be happy with this moment. It's just so rare to see in an actual story this type of development, and so early on at that. This is season 2, and to be completely blunt with you, Mushoku Tensei has enough content, I would actually say, to do at least 5 seasons. 5, maybe even 6 seasons, depending. Maybe I'm stretching it too much, but it definitely has at least 4 seasons. At the very minimum, it does have 4 seasons. So I think that just thinking about how so early on we have this marriage ceremony, it's truly beautiful, and I wish more anime, manga, and light novels did stuff like this. Instead of baiting you for 300 to 400 chapters, it just had a character that was destined to be with someone, get with someone, and we get to see their happy marriage, their life after marriage and all that, and see how they deal with the struggles of marriage and parenthood and all that. It's something I wish more series would really just dive headfirst into. So just shoutouts for that part alone for Mushoku Tensei, really having the guts to do something that most stories just do not do, at least when it comes to anime, manga, and light novels. Now, with all that being said, we need to talk about some of the things. The main vibe or theme that this episode sets up is preparation for the wedding ceremony. Basically, who should be invited, all the names, all the people out there that Rudy and Sylphy can invite, and also on top of that, kind of setting the house and all that up, like for instance with clothes and all that, what they can bring. And it's a really beautiful moment. I especially love this montage sequence where like they're just, finding stuff, they're like venturing around and going to different places, trying to find clothing for Rudy. And I especially like how the shots within the early stages of this episode tries to point out Rudy's just tattered clothing. Like if you take a hard look here at the bottom right, or the right side of the screen, you will see Rudy's clothing does look worn. You see the tears and rips at the bottom of it, and it showcases the years and months of use of his clothing. And obviously he's gotten a lot older and a lot taller, and I feel like this shows maturity and aging as well. And then that's another aspect that I really like about Mushoku Tensei that this episode does a good job with. It showcases basically the passage of time. It showcases that, time isn't stalled, it isn't stagnant. Everything is progressing alongside the characters. As people grow older, as the world grows older, as the characters grow older, it's beautiful. And you can clearly see that, especially with this episode. It wants to hone in on the fact that this isn't the same Rudy that we got at the beginning of the story. He's matured. He's out shopping basically with his wife. They're getting food for the party. They're debating on what they should cook, etc. It's super cute and adorable. And then they go to their house that they're going to be living in for the rest of their life. life. It's just, there's a lot here that just shows, like, time really is progressing, and it's the way the environment is as well. It's very immersive, and it's one of the big key factors that has always been very powerful for Mushoku Tensei is the immersion of the world. It is one of the most powerful aspects that the series has at its disposal, because you see the seasons, you see snow, you see summer, you see spring, and it just shows that time really isn't stand still. And this is a lot of problems that manga, light novels, and anime usually have as well, is that, like, they'll say at the beginning of the story the characters are, let's say, going in their first year of high school or college, and then 300 to 400 chapters pass, and they're still in their first year of high school or college. And I hate that. Like, I understand sometimes why it's like that, but it basically says that time really isn't progressing. And it's just like, this is unbelievable at this point. There's no way time is going this slowly. So I do appreciate Mushoku Tensei and the animators as well honing in on what really does make the series special, and not really trying to skirt around it, throw it under the rug, or just not trying to acknowledge it. It's that level of attention to detail that this series truly does need. And honestly, in all things considered, taking a look at just like what this episode is, I truly think that this goes back to just the quality of Season 1. There was a lot of people that had issues with Mushoku Tensei Season 2 Part 1, like the first half, and saying that it looked like a straight up downgrade. I talked about it in videos discussing it, etc. And obviously, there is some criticism that is fair. There is. But I think taking a look at, part 2, like episode 14 here, it definitely returns to the norm. Returns to what you would expect from Mushoku Tensei, but also what the character designs really should be like. It really is a good-looking episode. And I think that overall, that if this is what we have to expect from Mushoku Tensei Season 2, the rest of it, we're in for quite the treat, honestly. Now, one thing I do want to say is I love how all the characters within the wedding ceremony have their role to play, and it showcases that Rudy's life isn't as lonely as it once was, which is one of the most powerful moments that this episode presents, is that, Rudy has now garnered quite a group of friends. He has a wife, he has friends he can hang out with, he has, people he could count on. It's such a beautiful message, honestly, and, looking at where Season 2 began, where he was isolated and Eris, left him alone and he had no one, and seeing where he's at now, he's in just such a better place than he was even at the end of Season 1, and it's just nice to see that progression. Now, with all of that being said, there is something that does need to be talked about, and it is Elena and Sylphy's relationship, and this is something that I think is going to catch a lot of people by surprise, and so let's dive headfirst into this. So, Elena and Sylphy's relationship is officially revealed with this episode, but there has always been hints that they were related to a degree. And the person that told us this was Rudy himself within this episode. He talks in his own mind that, he saw the necklace that Sylphy had, he recognized, Elena-Lisa's necklace as well, and they're very similar. The anime at the beginning of Season 2 definitely wanted to showcase that there was something to do with the necklaces, and that they were very, very similar. It didn't directly tell you, but anyone paying attention to details, and those probably potentially binge-watching the show, probably picked up on it, and realized that there was something going on there. Either A, Elena-Lisa and Sylphy come from maybe a similar tribe of elves, or they're related to some degree. And thinking about who, Elena-Lisa is, and how she is as a person, it wouldn't be too far-fetched to assume that she might have kids to, in some way. So, all that considered, it's pretty interesting to finally see that revealed, and the foreshadowing finally come to fruition, and seeing everything happen. And it showcases finding family, that, Sylphy also isn't alone. Just as how, Rudy has a group of people that he could count on, he has family now, Sylphy is reforging bonds with a family member that she didn't know she really had, and I think that it's a very sweet moment, and finding out a lot about her character as well, like Elena-Lisa, and why she hid the fact that she was the grandmother of Sylphy. It is because of her lifestyle. We know, thanks to the first half of Season 2, that Elena-Lisa, she is not someone that could be considered maybe a good person from the outsider's perspective of her choices and lifestyle, and it's really wholesome seeing Cliff be there for her and want to be in a relationship with her, and her trying her best for him as well. And all we know is thanks to the curse that she has, is why she is like she is. And because of her lifestyle and what she had to deal with, she was bringing a lot of shame, so to speak, to her family. Any action she did of being basically a hound dog would look very badly on her children, and she didn't want that. So anytime that she had a kid, she would separate herself from them and not even tell them her name, because she didn't want to bring them any pain or burden to their life, because she would always ruin their potential relationships with people. So I think it's a really sad fact to see that, but it's also nice to see that Sylphy accepts Elise for who she is, and also Rudy as well showcases a lot of character development in saying that, he will not leave Elise thanks to her actions. I think that it's very beautiful. It shows the development that Rudy has had as a character, that he's not judging, someone that he loves or closest with thanks to the actions of another or their family member. I think it speaks volumes about his character and how he's grown since episode 1, and it also shows the bond between these two characters as well, because Elise and Rudy did travel for a bit, and they do have a bond to a degree, so I think that seeing this interaction is also very sweet, because it shows that, yes, he doesn't think she's an evil person or anything like that. And, he even cracks a joke and saying you should just be more worried that you're related to Paul now instead of anything else. So I think that's, it's just, yeah, it really says a lot about the characters and stuff, and that all the support characters to their own degree is developing, and we even see that from Nanahoshi here, which let's talk about that one. So I hinted at it at the beginning of this video, but Nanahoshi is clearly in a somewhat similar circumstance as Rudy was in his previous life. And what do I mean by that? Well, from all we've seen from her character thus far, she is a very isolated person that shuts herself off in her room for experiments. She's a very lonely person. Just looking at what we've seen from her only thus far, she just seems very lonely. She seems like a person that doesn't really have many friends, many people she could talk with and even have communication with. She's just someone that isolates herself to do experiments, etc. And it seems like a very lonely life. And she's always had this facade. The mask that she wears definitely represents another aspect, that she tries to put a barrier between her and others around her. And her going out of her way to even go to the wedding ceremony for Rudy and Sylphy shows that the mask that she wears is slowly cracking, and she isn't trying to hold back how she really feels or wanting to create bonds, because as human beings, we want to create connections, we want to create bonds, and you can see that aspect kind of reaching out here with Nanahoshi and how she goes to the wedding, but also how she even says in this scene, since Rudy has a bath that's very reminiscent of a Japanese bath, she wants to use it. And I think this shows that she wants to slowly start intermingling herself in the lifestyle of everyone around Rudy and getting to know them. And so it shows progression, that she's not trying to be isolated in four walls, and she's wanting to be better as a person as well. Just Mushoku Tensei is really about just growing, and I think that really shows really well, especially with this scene too, with Rudy versus Luke. And I think that one thing I want to point out is this scene here. I pointed this out on social media, but I think showing this picture here will just get the point across. I don't think that, they're saying that Rudy is Griffith and Luke is, Guts here, like from Berserk. I don't think that's what the scene is showing, but I think that it is kind of paying respects to the impact that Berserk has. I feel like whoever adapted this scene, like it was animated, etc., they definitely probably were inspired to make it look like this, like Berserk. Like, they wanted to. They wanted a nod to Berserk because of just the overall impact and weight that the series has on literature to begin with. And who's to say that Berserk, to some degree, doesn't have some form of impact on Mushoku Tensei's storytelling to begin with. But I wanted to point out that the duel between the two characters is actually very important. We get a lot about Luke's character and how he feels like, he's weak or insignificant, because after he gets defeated by Rudy, he slams his fist on the ground and he breaks his hand, from what you can see, or at least fractures it, and he has to get it healed. It shows that he feels very upset that he lost, and it shows that maybe he feels inadequate or, weak in comparison to Rudy, and he's very, very upset about that, or maybe there's something else going on there. But whatever the case may be, it's very clear that Luke has a lot of anger inside of him, and this duel was definitely a means to an end for him to basically get something out of his system, or to find something else out about himself. You could clearly chalk up this duel more or less as Luke basically saying, like, I want to see if you can protect Sylphy, but there definitely was a lot more context here than just that. I feel like Luke had something to prove to himself, and he probably figured it out if it was good or bad. But yeah, the scene is very impactful, and it shows how strong Rudy is, but also just how maybe, Luke as well might not be as strong as we thought he was. So yeah, overall, wonderful episode of Mushoku Tensei. I cannot wait for next week's episode. Absolutely beautiful. And so I will leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy my content and you want more of my content to appear in your subscription feed, then please subscribe. It does help me out a lot. And with that, Chibi out.